1 million people. By the year 1 CE, Rome held 1 million human beings within its walls. No other city on Earth would reach this number for another 1800 years. London, in the Industrial Revolution, with steam engines and railroads and coal-powered factories, finally matched what Romans built with concrete, slaves, and grain ships. This is the number your history books skip past too quickly. They tell you Rome fell because of barbarians, because of moral decay, because of lead pipes or lazy emperors or military overreach. They give you a dozen causes for the ending without explaining the achievement. Rome did not become a megacity through luck or geography or even military conquest. Rome engineered the ancient world's most sophisticated economic machinery to feed, water, and house a population 10 times larger than any competitor. The Roman state built a supply chain stretching from Egyptian wheat fields to African olive groves to Spanish silver mines, all flowing toward a single city. This was extraction at a scale the world would not see again until the British Empire. The grain ships did not make Rome wealthy. They made Rome possible. The aqueducts did not make Rome comfortable. They made Rome survivable. And when the machinery stopped, Rome did not slowly fade. It collapsed. Within 2 centuries, the Welcome to Rashii historian. We follow the money, trace the power, and expose the history they never taught you in school. The reason this matters to you sits outside your window. You live in a megacity or depend on one. Tokyo holds 37 million people. Delhi holds 32 million. New York, Sao Paulo, Shanghai, Lagos. These cities exist because of supply chains, infrastructure, and economic systems as fragile as the ones Rome built. Your water arrives through pipes you never think about. Your food travels thousands of miles before reaching your plate. Your electricity flows from power plants you have never seen. Rome proved megacities are possible. Rome also proved megacities are not permanent. The same systems enabling 1 million people to live together become the systems destroying them when they fail. In 2021, a winter storm shut down the Texas power grid for 4 days. People froze in their homes. In Cape Town, South Africa, the city counted down to day 0 when the water would run out. These are not modern problems. These are Roman problems. And Rome's answers and Rome's failures contain warnings we ignore at our own risk. Ancient cities had limits. These were extraordinary achievements. Most ancient cities never exceeded 50,000 residents. The logistics of feeding, watering, and housing more people created bottlenecks no ancient economy could solve. Food spoiled. Water ran short. Disease spread. A fire consumed entire neighborhoods built from wood and thatch. Rome broke every limit. The Forma Urbis Romae tells us how. This massive marble map, carved between 203 and 211 CE, covered an entire wall in the Temple of Peace. It measured 18 meters wide and 13 meters tall. Workers carved every building footprint, every street, every alley into marble slabs at a scale of 1 to 240. Only fragments survive today. About 10% of the original map exists in museum collections, but these fragments reveal a city of staggering density. Romans lived in apartment blocks called insulae. These structures rose 5, 6, sometimes 7 stories high. The poet Martial described climbing 200 steps to reach his rented room. Juvenal complained about the noise, the fire risks, the collapsing buildings, the chamber pots emptied from upper windows onto pedestrians below. Modern archaeologists estimate Rome contained around 46,000 insulae housing the majority of the population. The ground floors held shops and taverns. The upper floors held apartments growing smaller, darker, and cheaper with every level. Wealthy Romans owned the lower units. The poor crammed into upper rooms with no running water, no heat, and no sanitation beyond the public latrines. Population density in central Rome exceeded 70,000 people per square kilometer in some neighborhoods. Modern Manhattan averages around 28,000 people per square kilometer. Rome was nearly 3 times more crowded. This concentration created pressure points no ancient society had faced. The city consumed approximately 200,000 to 400,000 tons of grain per year. A single person required about 200 kilograms of grain annually for basic survival. Rome needed grain supplies sufficient for 5 million person-years of food, accounting for waste, spoilage, and the needs of visitors and slaves. No farmland within walking distance of Rome could produce this volume. The Italian peninsula itself lacked sufficient agricultural capacity. Rome required imports on a scale unprecedented in human history. The city also required water. Romans did not accept the water standards of other ancient peoples. They built public baths accommodating thousands of bathers. They installed fountains on street corners. They filled private pools and garden features in wealthy homes. They flushed public latrines with constant running water. Frontinus, the water commissioner appointed in 97 CE, documented the system in his official report De Aqueductu. 11 aqueducts fed the city. They delivered approximately 1 million cubic meters of water daily. This translates to roughly 264 million gallons, or about 1,000 liters per person per day. Modern Rome uses approximately 500 liters per person per day. Ancient Rome, with its bathhouses and fountains and display pools, consumed twice the water of its modern successor. The aqueducts stretched for hundreds of kilometers across the Italian countryside. The Aqua Marcia alone ran for 91 kilometers. Workers cut tunnels through mountains. Engineers built bridges across valleys. The entire system required constant maintenance, repair, and monitoring. None of this happened naturally. Every grain ship, every aqueduct mile, every apartment block represented deliberate choices backed by massive capital investment. Rome did not grow into a megacity. Rome was engineered into one. Egypt fed Rome. This single fact shaped Mediterranean politics for 5 centuries. The Nile River flooded each summer. Rich black silt deposited across the floodplain created the most productive agricultural land in the ancient world. Egyptian farmers harvested wheat yields roughly 3 to 4 times higher than Italian farms achieved. The desert on either side of the Nile meant virtually all cultivated land produced food rather than supporting competing uses. Augustus understood this when he conquered Egypt in 30 BCE. He did not make Egypt a normal Roman province with a Senate-appointed governor. He made Egypt personal property of the emperor, administered by a prefect chosen from the equestrian class rather than the senatorial aristocracy. No Roman senator could visit Egypt without imperial permission. This was not paranoia. This was strategic control of Rome's food supply. Surviving papyri from Egyptian archives document the extraction system. Egyptian grain traveled from farms to local granaries to regional collection points to Alexandria's harbor. Roman officials supervised each transfer. They weighed the grain, recorded the quantities, and arranged transport ships. The annona was the name Romans gave to the grain supply system. It functioned as the logistical backbone of the entire empire. A dedicated official, the Praefectus Annonae, reported directly to the emperor and commanded a fleet of grain transport ships. These ships sailed from Alexandria to Portus, the artificial harbor Emperor Claudius built at the mouth of the Tiber River. The journey took approximately 2 weeks under favorable winds. Ships departed Alexandria after the grain harvest in April and May. The sailing season closed in November when winter storms made Mediterranean travel deadly. This created a structural vulnerability. Rome depended on grain arriving during a 6-month window each year. Storage infrastructure had to preserve enough food to last through winter and spring until the new harvest arrived. Portus and the nearby port of Ostia held the warehouses making this possible. Archaeological excavations reveal massive storage complexes called Horea. The Horea Galbae in Rome itself covered over 21,000 square meters. Portus contained similar facilities with estimated capacity exceeding 1 million tons of grain. The scale of the operation required the ancient world's largest merchant fleet. Historians estimate between 500 and 1,000 ships serviced the grain route during peak season. The largest grain carriers, called the naves honoraria, displaced over 1,000 tons and required crews of several hundred men. The state subsidized this fleet through tax exemptions and guaranteed contracts. Ship owners who committed vessels to the grain trade received immunity from certain taxes and priority loading rights at ports throughout the empire. The incentives pulled private capital into public service. Egypt was not the only source. Rome also imported grain from North Africa, Sicily, and Sardinia. North African provinces, particularly the area of modern Tunisia, supplied an estimated 40 million modii of grain annually by the 2nd century CE. Sicily had fed Rome during the Republic before Egyptian conquests shifted the supply chain east. This geographic diversity was deliberate. Egyptian grain failed during low Nile floods. African harvests suffered during droughts. Multiple sources reduced the risk of total supply collapse. The machinery worked. For 3 centuries, from Augustus to the crisis of the 3rd century, the grain fleet delivered food to Rome with remarkable consistency. Famines struck other parts of the empire. Rome kept eating, but the system created dependencies as dangerous as they were invisible. Rome could not feed itself. If the grain ship stopped sailing, the population would starve within months. Every political faction understood this. Control of Egypt meant leverage over Rome itself. Rival emperors fought for Egyptian allegiance because the province was the pressure point controlling the capital. When the Vandals conquered North Africa in the 430s CE, they did not immediately threaten Rome with military invasion. They threatened Rome with starvation. They had captured the machinery feeding the city. Rome's fate now depended on Vandal goodwill. Water flowed downhill into Rome from springs in the Apennine Mountains. This simple fact enabled the greatest urban water system the ancient world produced. Frontinus became curator aquarum, the water commissioner, in 97 CE. He inherited a system already 2 centuries old and produced a detailed technical report documenting every aqueduct, every pipe diameter, every distribution point, and every problem. His report survives. It is the most complete engineering document from the ancient world. The first aqueduct, the Aqua Appia, entered service in 312 BCE. It ran mostly underground to protect the water supply from enemy attack. Rome was still a relatively small city, perhaps 100,000 people, when the Aqua Appia started flowing. By Frontinus's time, 11 aqueducts served the city. Each subsequent aqueduct was longer, higher capacity, and more expensive than its predecessors. The Aqua Marcia, built in 144 BCE, brought water from springs 91 kilometers away. Engineers calculated the precise gradient required for water to flow at optimal speed. Too steep a slope and water arrived with destructive force. Too gentle a slope and sediment accumulated in the channel. The Aqua Marcia descended approximately 260 meters over its length, a gradient of about 0.3%. Workers constructed this channel through mountains and across valleys. They dug tunnels through solid rock using hand tools. They built bridges and arcades to maintain the precise gradient when the terrain dipped. The famous stone arches visible in photographs of the Roman Campagna carried aqueducts across the lowlands approaching the city. The Aqua Claudia and the Anio Novus, both completed under Emperor Claudius in 52 CE, brought the system to peak capacity. The Anio Novus ran for 87 kilometers and entered Rome on arches 32 meters high, taller than a 10-story building. Frontinus calculated total flow at approximately 1,000 cubic meters daily. He complained about illegal taps diverting water before it reached official distribution points. He documented maintenance crews numbering in the hundreds. He detailed the specialized skills required: masons to repair channels, lead workers to maintain pipes, inspectors to monitor flow rates. The infrastructure cost represented a significant fraction of imperial revenue. Modern estimates suggest Rome spent between 2 and 5% of total state income on water infrastructure maintenance alone. This does not include original construction costs amortized over time. Where did this water go? Public fountains numbered in the hundreds. Romans collected drinking water from these fountains in pottery or bronze containers. No household below wealthy status had private water access. Public baths consumed the largest share. The baths of Caracalla, completed in 216 CE, covered 25 hectares and accommodated 1,600 bathers simultaneously. The baths of Diocletian, finished in 306 CE, were even larger. Rome contained hundreds of smaller bathhouses, scattered through every neighborhood. Bathing was daily ritual for Romans of all social classes. Admission prices remained low, sometimes subsidized by wealthy patrons seeking political favor. The poor washed alongside the rich in the same heated pools. These baths required not only fresh water, but heating systems. Furnaces called hypocausts circulated hot air beneath raised floors and through hollow walls. Slaves fed these furnaces with wood and charcoal around the clock. The fuel requirements of the baths created another supply chain, another extraction system pulling resources toward Rome. Public latrines flushed with continuous running water. Romans sat side by side on marble benches with openings overflowing channels. Sponges on sticks served as toilet paper, rinsed in channels of fresh water at the user's feet. The system was communal, public, and constant. The wealthy installed private water connections through lead pipes branching from main distribution tanks called castella. Frontinus documented the licensing system. Property owners paid fees based on pipe diameter. Inspectors supposedly prevented illegal connections, though Frontinus complained corruption undermined enforcement. The concentration of this water system in imperial hands created political leverage. Emperors controlled access to water. They decided which neighborhoods received priority flow. They funded new aqueducts to demonstrate benevolence. They could punish rebellious districts by restricting supply. Water was not a utility in Rome. Water was infrastructure of control. Rome invented state welfare on a mass scale. The annona included not merely grain imports, but grain distribution. The emperor fed the people for free. Augustus documented this system in his Res Gestae, the official account of his reign carved into stone monuments across the empire. He listed 200,000 Roman citizens receiving monthly grain rations at public expense. Later emperors expanded the rolls and added olive oil, wine, and pork to the distributions. This was not charity for the desperate poor. This was entitlement for citizens. Roman citizens born in the city, or those who qualified through specific service, received tokens called tesserae. They presented these tokens at distribution points on designated days. Officials measured grain into their containers. The standard ration was 5 modi per month, approximately 33 kilograms, sufficient calories for one adult male. The expense was extraordinary. Feeding 200,000 people required roughly 40,000 tons of grain annually at minimum. This was separate from the commercial grain supply, feeding the remaining 800,000 residents who purchased food in markets. Why did emperors maintain the system? The answer was structural control. Rome's population included hundreds of thousands of people with no stable employment. The ancient economy provided limited wage labor opportunities. Slaves performed most productive work. Free citizens competed for casual labor, petty trade, or client relationships with wealthy patrons. Hungry populations riot. Roman history before the grain dole demonstrated this repeatedly. Food shortages triggered violent protests. Mobs attacked magistrates. Buildings burned. The Republic nearly collapsed multiple times during grain crises of the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. The grain dole was not generosity. The grain dole was crowd control. Emperors who threatened the dole faced immediate political consequences. Juvenal's famous phrase, bread and circuses, described the twin foundations of urban stability. Feed the people, entertain the people. The population remains manageable. The entertainment infrastructure matched the food infrastructure in ambition. The Colosseum seated 50,000 spectators. The Circus Maximus held 250,000 for chariot races. These were state facilities, admission-free, costs borne by emperors and wealthy politicians seeking public favor. The gladiatorial games required their own supply chains. Training schools called ludi maintained fighters. Animal traders imported exotic beasts from Africa and Asia. Weapons manufacturers produced specialized equipment. The entertainment industry employed thousands and consumed enormous resources. All of this depended on the extraction machinery pulling wealth toward Rome from across the empire. Provincial taxes funded the urban food supply. Provincial resources stocked the arenas. Provincial slaves died for Roman amusement. Rome consumed without producing. The city manufactured little. Roman industry consisted primarily of processing imported materials and distributing finished goods. The famous Roman concrete enabled construction projects, but created no export economy. Roman craftsmen produced luxury goods for local consumption, but could not compete with Eastern manufacturers. This was not a sustainable economic model. Rome depended entirely on the continued flow of tribute from conquered territories. When the conquest stopped, when the frontiers stabilized, when military costs began exceeding military revenues, the economic foundation of the megacity started eroding. But for 3 centuries, the machinery worked. Grain flowed, water flowed, entertainment continued, and 1 million people lived in a city unlike anything the world had ever seen. The city of Rome in 500 CE bore no resemblance to the city of Rome in 100 CE. Population estimates for the 6th century range from 30,000 to 100,000 inhabitants. Even the most generous estimate represents a 90% decline from peak. The most conservative estimate represents a 97% collapse. The great apartment blocks stood empty or crumbled entirely. The forums filled with debris. The aqueducts broke one by one as maintenance ceased. The grain ships stopped sailing. This did not happen suddenly. The collapse stretched across 3 centuries of gradual deterioration, punctuated by catastrophic shocks. The crisis of the 3rd century, between 235 and 284 CE, marked the first major disruption. Civil wars tore the empire apart. Rival emperors battled for control. Frontiers collapsed under barbarian pressure. Plague swept through the population. The economic machinery strained under military demands. Rome's population likely declined to between 500,000 and 800,000 during this period. The city remained enormous by ancient standards, but had already lost its peak concentration. Diocletian's reforms at the end of the 3rd century stabilized the empire but transformed its structure. He divided imperial administration between multiple capitals. Milan became the Western emperor's residence. Later emperors chose Ravenna or Trier. Rome remained symbolically important but lost its position as the functional center of imperial power. Constantine completed the shift. He founded Constantinople in 330 CE as a second Rome on the Bosphorus. Constantinople had its own grain supply from Egyptian shipments. Constantinople had its own water system, bathhouses, and entertainment venues. Constantinople drew resources and attention away from Rome itself. The Western Empire weakened throughout the 4th and 5th centuries. Military pressures on the Rhine and Danube frontiers drained treasury reserves. Tax collection faltered in provinces devastated by raiding and civil conflict. The machinery feeding Rome began breaking down. The sack of Rome in 410 CE by Alaric's Visigoths shocked the Mediterranean world. For the first time in 800 years, a foreign army had captured the city. The Visigoths spent 3 days looting before withdrawing southward. The physical damage was significant but not catastrophic. The psychological damage was permanent. Rome was no longer untouchable. Vandal control of North Africa, after 439 CE, delivered the critical blow to Rome's logistics. The Vandals now controlled the grain fields feeding Italy. They raided coastal cities at will. They cut shipping routes across the western Mediterranean. The population of Rome dropped precipitously during the mid-5th century. Estimates suggest between 200,000 and 300,000 inhabitants remained by 450 CE. The Vandal sack of 455 CE was more destructive than Alaric's earlier attack. The Vandals spent 2 weeks systematically stripping the city of valuables. They carried off bronze roof tiles from temples. They emptied treasuries and private homes. The Gothic Wars of 535 and 554 CE administered the final destruction. Byzantine forces under Belisarius attempted to reconquer Italy from the Ostrogoths. Rome changed hands multiple times during this conflict. Sieges cut off food supplies repeatedly. The population fled. By the end of the Gothic Wars, Rome held perhaps 30,000 people. The aqueducts had been cut by besieging armies and never repaired. Only one, the Aqua Virgo, continued functioning. The great baths closed permanently without water supply. The forums became quarries. Romans stripped marble from ancient buildings for new construction or lime kilns. Cattle grazed where crowds once gathered. Churches rose within the shells of pagan temples. This was not barbarian destruction. This was the collapse of the infrastructure systems making the megacity possible. No one repaired the aqueducts because no one could fund the maintenance. No one imported Egyptian grain because no one controlled the shipping routes. No one maintained the insulae because no one collected the rents justifying upkeep. The city did not die from a single wound. The city died because every system sustaining it failed simultaneously. Remove the water and the baths close. Remove the grain and the population starves. Remove the imperial government and the maintenance budgets disappear. Remove the army and the raiders arrive. Rome proved a megacity is not a place. A megacity is a machine, and machines stop working when you stop maintaining them. You live inside systems as fragile as Rome's aqueducts. Your water travels through pipes laid decades ago. Maintenance budgets fall short every year. The American Society of Civil Engineers grades American infrastructure at D+ and estimates $2.6 trillion in deferred maintenance. Lead pipes still deliver water in cities across the developed world. Treatment plants age beyond design lifespan. Your food travels thousands of miles before reaching your table. The average American meal contains ingredients from 5 or more countries. Grain ships still cross oceans. Refrigerated trucks still roll down highways. The disruption of a single port, a single railroad, a single diesel fuel supply ripples across the entire system. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed these fragilities in real time. Toilet paper vanished from stores, not because production failed, but because distribution systems lacked capacity for sudden demand shifts. Meat processing plants closed and grocery stores ran empty. Global shipping delays stretched for months as ports choked on container backlogs. Rome depended on Egyptian grain ships sailing a predictable route during a predictable season. You depend on container ships sailing from Shanghai and trucks driven by workers who might not show up tomorrow. The structural parallels between Rome and modern megacities extend beyond supply chains. Rome concentrated population beyond local carrying capacity. Modern cities do the same. Los Angeles imports water from the Colorado River in Northern California. Phoenix would not exist without the Central Arizona Project pumping water from the Colorado across 336 miles of desert. Dubai desalinates seawater at enormous energy cost. Rome required massive capital investment in infrastructure maintained by central authority. Modern cities require the same, and when governments reduce infrastructure spending, systems decay. When private capital replaces public investment, equity determines access. Some neighborhoods get reliable water, others get lead pipes and boil advisories. Rome extracted resources from peripheral regions to feed the center. Modern economic geography follows the same pattern. Global cities pull wealth, talent, and materials from rural areas and developing nations. The concentration creates prosperity in certain places and deprivation in others. Rome's welfare state maintained urban stability through food distribution. Modern cities maintain stability through different mechanisms, but the underlying logic remains identical. Hungry people riot, employed people consume. The political economy of the megacity requires managing populations who cannot feed themselves from local resources. The collapse of Rome offers specific warnings. Deferred maintenance accumulates. The aqueducts did not fail overnight. They deteriorated over decades as repair budgets shrank and skilled workers disappeared. Each year of neglect made the next year's repair more expensive. Eventually, repair became impossible. Only replacement remained, and no one could afford replacement. American infrastructure follows the same trajectory. Bridges rated structurally deficient remain in service because replacement costs exceed available budgets. Water mains installed a century ago continue carrying drinking water despite corrosion and leaks. The interstate highway system, designed for 20-year pavement life, carries traffic on surfaces 40 and 50 years old. Supply chain concentration creates single points of failure. Rome depended on Egypt and North Africa for survival. When the Vandals seized North Africa, Rome lost its food supply. Modern supply chains concentrate production in similar fashion. Taiwan manufactures over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. A single disruption, earthquake, invasion, pandemic, would cripple global electronics production for years. Political fragmentation undermines infrastructure investment. The division of the Roman Empire weakened the economic integration making Rome possible. Constantinople competed with Rome for resources and attention. Regional powers prioritized local needs over system-wide maintenance. Modern political fragmentation follows similar patterns. Local governments compete for investment rather than coordinating infrastructure. National governments prioritize short-term spending over long-term maintenance. International coordination on shared resources, water, atmosphere, shipping lanes, fails repeatedly. Climate change adds pressures Rome never faced. Modern megacities confront rising seas, intensifying storms, shifting precipitation patterns, and temperature extremes testing infrastructure designed for different conditions. Rome's aqueducts assumed consistent spring flows from the Apennines. Modern water systems assume consistent snowpack and rainfall patterns already changing beyond historical bounds. The megacity is humanity's greatest achievement and humanity's greatest vulnerability. 1 billion people now live in cities exceeding 10 million inhabitants. 2 billion more live in cities exceeding 1 million. These populations cannot disperse. The agricultural land does not exist to support scattered settlement at current population levels. The economic systems depend on urban concentration. The infrastructure investments lock populations in place. Rome did not choose to decline. Rome did not vote for collapse. The systems maintaining the city failed because the investments maintaining those systems stopped. The barbarians did not destroy Rome. The barbarians occupied ruins already abandoned by Romans who could no longer live there. Your city will not choose to decline either. Your city will decline when the water stops flowing, when the food stops arriving, when the power stops generating, when the maintenance stops happening. Rome lasted 3 centuries as a megacity. Industrial London has lasted 2 centuries. Tokyo has lasted 1 century. The question is not whether modern megacities will face Rome's fate. The question is when, and whether we will learn from Rome's experience before it is too late. The Forma Urbis. Romae hangs in fragments on a museum wall. The marble map shows streets and buildings and public spaces for a city that no longer exists. Someone carved every structure into stone, believing Rome would last forever. 1 million people lived there. They bathed in heated water. They ate Egyptian bread. They watched gladiators die in amphitheaters built to last millennia. Then the grain ships stopped. Then the aqueducts broke. Then the people left. The ruins remain. The lessons wait for anyone willing to learn them. And now you know the truth about the lost megacity of the ancient world and the warning it holds for the cities you inhabit today.